Good evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar entitled The New World Order of College Baseball Recruiting. I'm BJ Schecter, editor and publisher at Baseball America, and I'll be your host and moderator for tonight's event. With the cancellation of all spring seasons at the high school and collegiate levels, and the reduction of the 2020 Major League Baseball draft from 40 rounds to 5, the landscape has dramatically changed. Everything you've learned or have been told to this point is now out the window. Tonight, we'll look at the new world order with a panel of experts in the field who, like all of you, are figuring out things on the fly as they change every day. In fact, just yesterday, we learned that the dead period in recruiting has been extended to July 31st, making things significantly more difficult. Before introducing our panel, tonight's webinar is brought to you by the 3-2 Count Foundation, a new nonprofit organization whose mission is to help underprivileged youth reach their baseball and softball dreams. We need more organizations like the 3-2 Count Foundation. I believe so strongly in their mission that I'm a member of the board. Tonight's event is being conducted on Zoom and live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. Now to our panel. We are honored and privileged to be joined by 4 distinguished gentlemen whose experience and insight will be invaluable to parents, coaches, and student athletes. On Tuesday night, we gathered virtually as a group, and I learned a great deal during that time. I know you will too. I will introduce them now. First, we have Brad Clement, who's CEO of Perfect Game, the largest tournament and showcase company in the country. Brad is a former school administrator and went through the process you're going through now with his sons. Next, we have Rob Sheppard, who is the head baseball coach at Seton University, where he has led the Pirates for the last 16 years. The Sheppard family is Seton Hall baseball. Rob inherited the program from his father, who won 998 games in 31 years from 1973 to 2003. Next, we have Guevin, who is the founder and executive director of KeepPlayingBaseball, a nonprofit organization providing a free source of information and advice for all high school players who want to play college at any level. Ethan has been involved in baseball for most of his life and is a former Division I coach. Finally, we have Kevin Manero, who is the head baseball coach at North Penn High School in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. He's been involved in community high school and American Legion baseball for more than 17 years and has led the North Penn a team to multiple PAIAA District 1 and state championships. Kevin is also a member of the 3-2 Count Foundation board. So welcome, gentlemen. Tonight, we're gonna divide the webinar into numerous segments. At the end, we'll leave some time for questions. If you do have a question at any time, we encourage you to submit them through the chat function, as we'll have people monitoring the chats. And we'll get to some of your questions maybe during the segments, but we'll leave some time at the end. Now to the first segment, the new world and what does it look like? I'm going to start with you, Coach Sheppard, since you're right in the center of the storm. What does the new world order of recruiting look to you? And it seems to be changing by the day.
Yeah, as you mentioned in the opening, with the increase of the dead period, now everything is going to be condensed into a shorter period of time. And I know Brad will probably touch upon it with a lot of his tournaments that are coming up and showcases. But for us, from a college standpoint, the window we have to observe and evaluate and communicate with players on campus has shortened considerably. So we have our work cut out for us. We're continuing to communicate with the players now, and players have been communicating with us. It's just a matter now of getting out and seeing them play and compete. And unfortunately, we will have to wait until August to do that.
Kevin, a lot of your players are probably asking you what's going on. We'll get to the sophomores and juniors, but for your seniors, what are you hearing and what are you telling?
Well, I think the biggest thing with the seniors, and ironically, it's no different than probably what we would say most of the time, and that is that it's going to be very competitive when you get onto a college campus. And so there's no time right now to be sitting around, and I don't mean to sound rough with this, but there's no time to sit around and feel sorry for yourself that you're not playing baseball right now, because you're going to get onto a campus in a couple of months, hopefully, and things are going to be competitive, but more so now because there's going to be heavier rosters. There's going to be more guys to compete with. And so that spot that might have seemed like it was yours when you were recruited or when a coach communicated with you, maybe that spot's going to be up for competition now. So I think the most important thing is that if for a senior who's ready to play college baseball, if that person is laying in bed until 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, somebody else got up early in the morning and somebody else is doing something on his own to get more physically ready and to compete and to be ready to go in the fall. So I think that's the most important thing, is to just stay physically and mentally ready and be ready for the new challenges ahead.
Brad, most players who play college baseball, I would say probably 75% or greater, probably come through your events. Right now, there are not many events going on, and you have contact with coaches and MLB scouts and so forth. What does your new world look like? We're having a problem with your audio, Brad. Okay, I'm gonna go to you, Ethan. You're dealing with not necessarily the elite kid, but the kid who is struggling for opportunities and ways to be seen, and it's got to be harder, even harder for them. What are you seeing, and what are you telling your kids?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a big trickle down effect, right? It's going to hit Division I. Those rosters are going to be crowded. There's going to be difficult decisions. So that's going to go to junior college and Division II, and even Division III will feel the squeeze. So I think these guys hit it on the head that it's going to be more competitive than ever. But I think it's important to point out that while the Division I dead period is extended, Division II, Division III, NAIA, some of the other levels have a little bit looser restrictions right now. So there will be coaches out. And one thing that's actually can help some players is, you have coaches like Rob right now and all over the country who are in the same place, right? They're sitting at home when usually they would be out recruiting. Some teams would be in postseason play right now. So you have a captive audience. So if you're looking to play next year, you need to get proactive with marketing yourself and reaching out to college coaches, casting a wide net so that, it's not just Division I. There's many different paths to get to college baseball. So consider all of them and start by casting a wide net.
Brad, are we your audio working now? What does your world look like, given that we're just past Memorial Day weekend, which is a big time for all baseball tournaments, and I know certainly for Perfect Game.
Yeah, no doubt. We had 5 Memorial Day tournaments scheduled across the country, and none of them were held. We do have a couple small events. I believe it's in Florida this weekend, but we'll really get into more of the tournament and event business in early June, depending on where it's at. And first of all, thank you for allowing us to be a part of this. Secondly, we do want to recognize that there are things going on which are causing these that are much more important. So we want everybody to be safe and healthy. And as we start these events, the tournaments or showcases, whatever the players and prospects and their families are going to be able to attend, it's really important that they do, as Rob and some of the others said. Kevin, you need to make sure that you're doing something to put yourself in a good position to attend these events, because the last thing we want is for someone not to have the adequate ramp up time and injure themselves trying to do too much too quickly. But we're excited. We're planning and replanning, have a lot of contingency situations at play, and obviously getting the venues ready so that we can do it in as safe a way as possible as well. But helping players get to whatever their next level is what our business is.
Right. I mentioned at the beginning, Rob, that college baseball right now is at the center of the storm. And it's really a trickle down effect. And you're really caught in the middle, because with the Major League Baseball draft losing 35 rounds, a lot of players are not going to get drafted, both in high school and in college, pushing them into college. And then you have the NCAA, which has said, understandably and admirably, that they would allow seniors who lost their season to get an extra year of eligibility. So here in college baseball, especially at the Division I level where you have roster restrictions, 11.7 scholarships, it's really jammed. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, that is the biggest adjustment that all the Division I schools, I think all the schools have to make. I think Ethan had mentioned it. There's going to be a lot more competition at the major league level. Going from 40 rounds to 5 rounds, it's going to be a lot more competitive to be a draft and stay within the minor league system. They're actually reducing the number of minor league teams, so that is going to get a lot more competitive. I think that's really good for the college game. I think there's going to be more players that are going to stay in college. I believe Major League Baseball looks at college baseball as an opportunity to help develop the players, somewhat like a minor league system. But it is at this point, with the inclusion of the seniors that are returning and the incoming freshman classes that were possibly high draft choices, there's going to be some crowding on some rosters, and it's going to have an effect for a few years, especially if the draft follows what they're saying is next year. I think they're saying anywhere from 10 to 20 rounds, but this year specifically is going to be very crowded with the amount of seniors returning, and then you have the juniors and incoming freshmen that may have been drafted in a 40-round draft now back going to school. So this may have an effect not only this year but for a few years to come.
Kevin, what are you telling your high school kids that may be a fringe Division I prospect? Not only are there fewer spots with universities suffering financially from COVID. We saw a couple weeks ago that Bowling Green has eliminated baseball. We're seeing athletic departments who did not have the NCAA tournament. We don't know what's going to happen with college football, which is going to really trickle down and affect. So we have that coming in the future. What are you telling high school kids who have aspirations to play Division I, but because of log jams or they haven't been able to be seen, that opportunity may not exist?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was actually in a Zoom meeting last night with LaSalle alumni. I played there a little while ago now, but we're talking about the challenges they're facing from an economic standpoint. And I'm seeing what you're seeing all over the country with athletic departments being reshuffled. So one of the things that I very much believe in for all potential college athletes, Division I through III, but really guys that have that target for Division I school, it's fantastic. And it's potentially, maybe that is the right spot for them. But I really think that everybody needs to start looking at things really going forward here. And that is saying, okay, where do I want to be academically? What is the major I want? What's the size of the school I want? What are the finances that are going to be good for my family? The location of the school. Those things are all top priority. And whether that ends up leading down the path of a D1, D2, or D3 school, that has to come first, because there's definitely, as we're saying, there's a lot more uncertainty right now with playing baseball at the next level than ever before. There's a lot less uncertainty with being in a college classroom and pursuing a career and all that. So I really think this is the best time to sort of reset the pins and approach it that way first. So, we can talk a little bit more about how kids are going to approach the actual baseball side of it in a bit, but simply from choosing a school, maybe when you make that list of location, finances, major, maybe it doesn't lead you to a whole list of Division I schools. And maybe there's a lot of other possibilities out there that you're going to set yourself up for success, whether that baseball plays out or not.
And BJ, if I can jump in real quick, fit is probably the most important thing. You want to go to a place where, number one, you're going to get a meaningful degree, a degree that you can, once your baseball career is over, you can go on and make a career out of something else. And Kevin makes a really good point. Fit is probably the most important thing, especially at this time where people are making some adjustments, whether it be they were hit financially, or in some cases, some students may have wanted to initially be a little further from home. And under these current conditions, maybe they want to stay a little bit closer. So fit is right at the top of making that choice. And obviously there's a lot of things that go into that, and baseball is just one of them. But as Kevin said, there's a lot of parts that have to be considered.
And what are you telling your kids, Ethan, who they may not have some of the opportunities that some of the elite players have, and probably are facing some bigger problems at home.
Yeah, I think these guys hit the nail on the head. It's all about program fit. I think that chasing level designation is a huge trap. A lot of people don't realize that within the same level, there's Division I teams that are powerhouses, and then there's Division I teams that would consistently lose to some of the powerhouses in JUCO or D2. So I think it's a trap to make level designation the primary thing, and that's a trap that a lot of kids fall into. So regardless of what type of player you are, these guys hit the nail on the head. It's all about finding your fit, and I think you really have to think about it as a player in terms of, it's not in the recruiting process you're going to see and be sold all the good things, right? Coaches are trying to put their best foot forward, and they should. But when you're living that life day to day, right? When you're waking up, going to weights early, when you're going to class, when you're training and doing all those things, the reality really sets in. And so some of the things that sell people during the recruiting process aren't really what they should be focusing on. But if you check those boxes, like Kevin said, if you first and foremost academically, you find an academic fit, you find a financial fit, you find the type of school environment and even academic culture that's going to support you as a student athlete, I think that's the place to start. And then, your baseball aspirations may be a big part of that, but whether you're a kid who's really just scratching and clawing to get to the next level, or whether you're a big time recruit, I think it's all the same. You've got to focus on development and becoming the best player you can. And then you've got to really hone in on, hey, what does that fit look like? Because it's a lot easier to find that fit when you know what you're looking for. And then you can go ahead and get informed and find everything you can out about that school, about that level, and really make sure everything checks the boxes. So I think it's the same regardless of whether you're a marginal player or whether you're, a 5-star recruit.
So Brad, a lot of coaches, both at the college level and the major league scouts, come through your events. Neither can travel right now. And I know you're kind of changing, how you're viewing some events based on the restrictions. So, what can players that come to your events that coaches are probably not going to be at, how can they get seen and hone in their game? I know you guys are doing to address that.
Yeah, it's certainly an issue. And as Rob shared, and all of you did, it just was backed off another 30 days yesterday. And we're not certain that this is the last 30-day recruiting period that will go on either. And we understand that. So what we're trying to do is do more streaming, so that the college coaches and the families who can't attend can actually see the games or see the parts of the games, that sort of thing. We are also running more. Obviously, we have our national events that most people are aware of, and we recognize it's going to be difficult for some families and prospects to get there. But we're also running more local events in different parts and regional events in different parts of the country, to allow the players just to play. That's the number one thing, is we want to get out and we want to enjoy the game, because building skill and being able to show that to the people that are there. And then obviously we have a robust website with player profiles and different video and metrics that go on there that college coaches, many of them at all levels, as well as families, can see. So we want to get as much information out there, but there's no question it's a greater challenge for not only the players and their families, but also for the colleges and the professional scouts, because they just don't have the opportunity to get out like they have in past years.
Let's turn to the next segment and talk about. We talked about the trickle down effect, but really, the classes of 21 and 22. And it's not just the 20s as things changing, it's going to affect them. I know you deal with this every day, Kevin. So how do you see it affecting the 21s and 22s?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is what I've seen as a trend in marketing yourself for college baseball is there's so many events now. There's so many showcases. There's people that will put videos together for you. They'll put your profile out there. They'll basically do all of that marketing work for you. And I think now the biggest challenge is a lot of those events and things just aren't existing. And we don't know when they're going to start up again. Some stuff is still on the table. A lot of stuff's been canceled. So one of the things that I think this is presenting an opportunity for is for people to kind of take a step back and say, hey, what can I do to advocate for myself? What can I do without all of those big opportunities? And, one of the things that I found over the last couple of months, interestingly enough, is I've had more conversations with college coaches than probably I ever have this time of year because they're all around. We've had a lot of communication with some of our players and college coaches, and a lot of people want video. You get into a good discussion back and forth, and the next question usually is, can you send me some video? So it might cost thousands of dollars for a kid over the course of a summer or 2 summers to use all these outside marketing tactics for themselves, but it costs a lot less money to go on Amazon and buy a $25 cell phone tripod and go over to a field that's open. And if that's not happening yet, it probably soon will be, that there's places you can go out and work out, and you can make a quick video of yourself. And you can put that together. You can ask your high school coach for help with that. I know, for my guys, I'll do anything like that for them. And it's probably, again, I have more time in my hands now than I've ever had before from a baseball standpoint. So I think really becoming a self-advocate and trying to do as many things on your own as you can is the best step forward. I think that probably a good idea too is, as we talked about before, narrowing that list. You can put a video of yourself on social media, but you also can do some lead work and say, let me be more specific. I don't want to waste a coach's time if it's a school that I don't want to go to. So let me find 10 schools that I can communicate with and send some video there and have a high school coach follow up and send a follow-up email kind of advocating for you. So I think there's a lot that can still be done for the 22s, the 21s. It's just a matter of being a little bit more resourceful.
Recruiting is an art and a science, and I know you have enough on your plate, Coach Sheppard, with the 20s. How are you starting to think about the 21s and 22s?
No, we're well into our 21 class and have some commits to our 22s already. I think the recruiting process has sped up so much that a number of schools already have players committed for the 21, 22, and even some schools will have some 23s already. The issue is going to be finding the guys to finish those classes. And as Kevin said, I think this is an opportunity for the players to show some resiliency and also use the technology that's available. Video is a big thing. I know a lot of guys can do it, like Kevin said. You can do it on your own. You can find a way to keep yourself, busy, or even if you have old video that you can put together and do it in a way that you can get little snippets out to the coaches. But I think another important part, and kind of feeding off of what Ethan and Kevin both said, is players have some time and their parents have some time. This is when they do their homework. Look at the schools that they're looking at. Look at their rosters. How many juniors, how many seniors, what's the turnover going to be? What is it like to, there's a lot of virtual tours now, so they can do virtual tours. They can get a feel for what the university is like to help them navigate through the process. So instead of just waiting and hopefully, going to play and catching someone's eye, sometimes if you're a really good student, or if you're a good student, you have a significant interest or sincere interest in a school, that goes a long way. So if someone I know, knows about Seton Hall University or any program and knows about that program and communicates that, once the field's open and the tournament's open, those guys that have communicated, like Kevin said, will be the guys that if we have a chance to go out and see, they're going to be the guys probably at the top of the list, because they've shown some significant interest in us. So not only is it something to put your baseball skills together and get that information out and send some communication through email to the coaches, but also to do their homework so that they can make an educated decision. The other part of this is, from an NCAA standpoint, we're restricted on what we can do with each class. So we can communicate with the 20s and 21s the only communication we can have with a 23 or a 22 graduating class is they have to call us, and we have to answer. We can't call back. We can't respond to a text. Emails have to be about camp. So we're kind of restricted in that regard too. So unless it's initiated by the student athlete from the 22 or 23 class, there's really very limited amount of connection that a Division I coach could have.
Got it. Brad, I'm going to ask you to put on your parent hat and not your perfect game hat. You had sons that played at a high level. If you were a parent now, what would you tell other parents given where we are now, which is unprecedented?
Well, first of all, I had sons that played at various levels, not some of them at a higher level than others, but exactly what these guys have said. Be resourceful and figure out first of all, what do I need to do to get better, and do the skill development part wherever you can. Use all of the people resources, because let's face it, we're all in a people business here. And that's high school coaches, that's getting to know the college coaches, it's travel ball coaches, and the interrelationship between high school and travel ball coaches, which is typically pretty good now in most parts of the country. And make sure that you're communicating and networking where you want to be. And then I think fine tuning, as the guys have already said, in reality, what's a good fit for me? Going back to that again and narrowing that focus, because we've talked, not only has the draft clogged the drain a little bit for the 20s, 21s, and 22s, but we also have a more limited opportunity to be seen, at least in the next couple months, and then focus, okay, where do I need to put my energies to be seen in in August if it opens up, or this fall if you're a 21, 22, or 23. So, and there are people out there that can help you do that. Certainly we'd like for people to attend a perfect game event, but we recognize there are other good places with college camps that are out there, and just getting better individually from a skill development and strength and conditioning way as well. Technology really allows for a lot of things to happen that wouldn't have a few years ago with the pandemic that we're all experiencing now.
We have our first question, and I'm going to stay with you here, Brad, and I'm going to ask you to put your PG hat back on because the question is about PG. And one viewer asks, will PG be hosting tournaments only in states that are green?
We'll be hosting hosting events in states wherever we can, and certainly our guide is the CDC, along with the national, state, and local health. And some of them are going to open up, and we've got COVID restrictions that go through all of that for not only players, but other people that do. But we anticipate hosting events in all parts of the country where the pandemic allows us to do so, both area, regional, and national events. And if need be, just reach out to staff at Perfect Game, and we'll be happy to help find a location for you that should be helpful. That's both tournaments and showcases.
Great, thank you. Ethan, your foundation's mission is to help kids achieve whatever their baseball dreams are, particularly for the underclassmen during this time. How are they to do that? How is your Keep Playing Baseball helping them do that?
Yeah, so I think, as I listen to these guys speak, it's funny because I think everything's changed, but nothing's changed at the same time. So it's just a matter of a shifting perspective, right? And you have Brad alluded to it, all these guys alluded to it, where there's this idea that there's one path and you have to go to the showcase and you have to get exposure and you have to pay for all these things to make it to the next level. And the reason why we exist is to show that you don't have to do that. So if you have $0 to spend on the recruiting process, we feel like there's a path to college baseball for you. And so it's doing what these guys are talking about, which it's always been a luxury to go to a showcase, to have someone make the video for you, to hire an outside agency. They're often thought of as necessities, but they're actually luxuries, because you can always do this stuff yourself. And truth be told, college coaches like hearing directly from players better. They like to see that players are willing to put in the sweat equity. They like to see, because when you put together your own video, when you write an email and reach out with genuine interest, when you educate yourself on the process, you're showing college coaches what they already want to see. They want to see that you're responsible, accountable, that you'll take initiative. So as an underclassman, we say the earlier you start the recruiting process, the better, but that doesn't mean you're reaching out to college coaches. It's just understanding the college baseball opportunities that are out there. So again, it's not just Division I. There's over 1,600 college baseball programs in the country, all levels. So if you really want to play college baseball, there's a place for you. I know schools that are in, their JV teams are part of the enrollment-driven process, where if you're willing to pay, you have a opportunity at that program. But as a young kid, what's most important as an underclassman, a lot of them like to chase exposure, but meaningful exposure, it requires the player to have recruitable skill set first. And a lot of these younger players, they're just not physically developed. So what can you do to put yourself in the best position when you do develop those skills? Well, it's academics, right? Making sure you're in the right classes, you're meeting eligibility criteria, double checking your counselor, because we know that counselors have too many students. Your grades as a freshman are just as important as your grades as a senior. It's understanding the opportunities out there, so that hey, when this coach at a program I've never heard of reaches out with interest, you don't blow them off, because that could be a great fit for you. And it's understanding the hoops that you're going to have to jump through as you go through this process, so that when a coach like Rob reaches out and says, hey, we saw you play at XYZ, or I got your email, your video looked really interesting, you know what to do. You're not scrambling to keep up. So, while we're talking about this new age of recruiting, I think the focus is always on, 1, getting informed, 2, developing into the best player you can, and then 3, understanding that there's infinite paths to college baseball. There's not one path, and you don't have to have a lot of money to get there. So what our website does, what our program does, is it empowers kids and parents and families with the resources to understand how to do this DIY recruiting process, understand how to make the video, write the email, make sure you're in the right classes, and ask the right questions during the recruiting process. So it doesn't have to be expensive. And I'm getting a little long-winded, but yeah, I think these guys hit the nail on the head.
Well, thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to our next segment, but first we have another question. This is for you, Rob. It's about college rosters. The question is, are college rosters expanding for 21? And if so, will they be expanded beyond next year?
So right now, the only expansion that has been approved would be the returning seniors to your program. So for example, all Division I's may have the ability to have 35-man roster. But if some of your seniors are returning, whatever seniors that are returning would be an addition to. There is a legislation moving around right now that they're trying to have an uncapped roster for this year only, which would make next year very interesting, because if say for example, a team has a roster of 40, 45 to 50, I was reading somewhere where some teams may have a roster up to 60 players. I don't know how a Division I team will have the ability to do that, but I read that somewhere. But what I was told was by next year, you had to be back down to 35. So whatever they come up with, whatever they finalize the rosters with this year, the roster will have to return to a 35-man roster next year. So that's where this this does trickle down to the following, the 21s, the 22s, the transfer portal from school, from players transferring from one school to another may become more prevalent than it is currently because of that.
All right, I'm going to move on to our next segment, and we kind of set it up with the video, and it's what can you do to be seen or simply just connect. And Ethan alluded to it. You mentioned it, Kevin, with the video, but beyond making a video, what can players who want to be seen or considered or express their interest in a program at any level, what can they do to connect with coaches, especially during this time?
Are you pointing to me?
I'm sorry. I was going to go to Kevin.
Okay. Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I want to say that not all is lost. And I know that we're talking about a lot of the new challenges and how difficult everything is, but I've talked to several college coaches and they're all in different positions with their roster and their program. So like I talked to one Division II coach in our area who has a very strong program, and he said, well, at one point I was looking for, 4 or 5 pitchers out of the 21 class, and now I only need 1 or 2. But then I talked to another Division II coach in the same state who said, well, we lost 5 seniors last year and I need about 4 or 5 pitchers. And so I think it really depends who you talk to. So not all is lost. And I think doing your homework and finding the schools that still have that availability and are the best fit, I still do believe is the first step. Now, as far as, reaching out and marketing, I guess if I could just be a little bit more specific about some of the video first. One of the things I want to say is that you really don't need a lot. So if you get into a cage, if there's a cage that you have access to, or like I said, hopefully those will open up more in the coming weeks. If you can set up a tripod and take a bunch of swings, you're showing somebody a lot. I know this is going to sound real corny and it's going to sound like some old world thing, but you don't even need a radar gun if you're a pitcher. All you need is a stopwatch. And there's a formula to take a stopwatch and turn it into miles per hour. And I'm an English teacher. I'm not a math guy, but even I can figure that out. It's not that difficult. Or if you wanted to invest in something, you could invest in pocket radar, which is cheaper than a full-fledged radar gun. So there's a lot of things like that you can do, even in this climate. But I also think, and Ethan alluded to this also, personal, well-written, well-crafted emails, reaching out to a coach and asking questions or providing, your own knowledge of that program that says, hey, I've looked around at your program and I think you're a good fit and this is what I can do. And I'm really interested in finding out more. Find out if some of these colleges are still planning to have camps or clinics in the fall. Get on board, sign up with that. Still continue to look for events that are still open later in the summer and coming up in the fall as well. But in the meantime, communicate, open that line of communication. If a coach can't reach out to you directly, send your coach's information, your high school coach's information, your summer team information too, because that's a conduit to a lot of coaches. And don't overlook the fact that there is a very active network of coaches. So even if a coach hasn't seen you specifically, that coach might ask somebody who has. And there's a lot of that goes on even among high school coaches. I'll get calls from college coaches asking about guys on other teams. So there's a lot of networking there. So be aware of that and use those resources to your advantage.
Ethan, you mentioned writing an email. You mentioned the academic route. You were a Division I assistant at various places. What other things can kids do to get on coaches' radars?
I think the more channels you have to connect with coaches, the better. So when we poll college coaches each year, almost every coach says the best way is email. We're seeing a little bit of a transition to social media. So in the past, it would have been weird to maybe DM a coach on Twitter. Now it's not that weird. You have great access to coaches through channels like Rob Friedman's Flat Ground Apps and Flat Ground Bats, where his Twitter following has thousands of coaches, and you plop your video right there on social media. You give a few important pieces of information and he'll send that out, and it's seen by thousands of college coaches. You can have a profile, you can have, and these guys have alluded to it too, where tap into your social network. I think everyone's baseball network is bigger and stronger than they think it might be. But even if you just played with someone who moved on to the college level, well, that's how you can get your foot in the door with that program, or say, hey, would you mind giving your coach a heads up that I'm going to be calling, emailing, or whatever. So I think while email and video is still the best and preferred route, there's a lot more avenues opening up. And so the more you can kind of spread those eggs out instead of putting them in one basket, the better shape you're going to be.
Yeah, Coach Sheppard, you mentioned the other night when we all got together that that you were looking at potential recruits via TikTok, and I'm going to show my age here, and I must admit I'm not really sure what TikTok is, and I've asked many students and my own sons to explain it to me, and nobody's given me a really good explanation. But you found a baseball channel there, so tell us about that, and what else can kids do to connect with you and your staff?
I think that everybody's is hitting the nail on the head, with the network and having people around. And sometimes it may not even be your coach. I know a friend of mine who played college baseball as a math teacher at a high school. And he's turned me on to some of the players and athletes at the school, because I really don't know the coach as well. And as you mentioned, and Ethan has mentioned with technology, I had a friend of mine that I went to graduate school with, who was a big TikTok influencer. I personally don't have a TikTok account, but he was sending me videos and things of a TikTok, I guess, at 5 tool. And it has just little snippets of players with, catcher throwing, showing his pop time, a hitter swinging the bat, pitchers throwing a fastball, curveball, change, or whatever it is. But they're finding a way. They're being resilient. They're being resourceful, and they're finding a way to market themselves in a number of ways. I think the best way is what we touched upon: a well-crafted personal letter, email. To me, sometimes you get those services, and not to knock anybody's service, but I know players that have been committed for 2 years, and I'm still getting service, emails from those services about these guys being available. And I know they're committed. I know I know them really well. We recruited them, and they're committed. They signed letters of intent. And this past spring, we're still getting emails. So nothing replaces the personal touch of an email from a player who can then send or attach a clip of a video. And as Kevin said, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be a video from behind the catcher, for a pitcher, from, side view of a hitter, the open side, anything that they feel that they can do with their iPhone or anything. It's really something simple. And for me, the simpler, the better, because it doesn't have to be a well-produced with a musical background, just something that we can break down and slow down and watch. And it's helpful.
We're going to stick with you, Coach Sheppard. We have 2 questions. One, talking about emails. A viewer asks or says that coaches get hundreds of emails from players. How can somebody who sends an email to you or somebody on your staff stand out?
Well, again, I think it has to be personalized. If someone sends me an email and says, hey, your sports media program is very good. I know, BJ Schecter runs part of that, and he does his homework about, maybe the graduation rate, or, our baseball program's been in the APR. We've been getting the APR award, which means we've been graduating our seniors in 4 years and things like that. And it has a little bit more of a personal feel of what the university can provide. That shows that they've done some homework. The other part of that is what they have done academically too. So I know Kevin and both Ethan mentioned it, and Brad did as well. Academics opens a lot of doors with baseball, especially at the Division I level. We're limited with scholarships. So I think some of the attraction to Division I is because Division I has more scholarship dollars, but we still have 11.7 for 35 players. So when I'm looking at an email and I see somebody who is very, very strong academically, who I feel will be able to help himself out, with getting some academic money, I will be in a better position, because now I can probably couple some academic money and athletic money if that candidate is strong enough of a student. So sometimes, looking at the academic qualifications in relation to what they can do athletically is a big part of it too.
We have another question that has to do with Seton Hall, and a viewer asks, do you have any seniors coming back for the 2021 season?
So we had 8 seniors, all 8 graduated on time. And it's a big decision for a lot of guys to make. They've played their career, they're going into their senior year. And in some cases, some of the young men had job opportunities upon graduation. We had a couple players that were out of state, so they had some big decisions to make. So we have 4 of our 8 coming back. And I think that is usually the average from what I've been hearing. About 50% or so of the seniors that have been graduating, maybe a little less, have been coming back. There are some graduate transfers that I've seen a lot more of this past year. I know it's been prevalent in women's and men's basketball, but this year baseball has seen a lot of graduate transfers. So for us, 4 of the 8 seniors are returned.
Great. I'm going to end this networking segment with you, Brad. It's not just reaching out to college coaches directly or sending videos or whatever. At Perfect Game and other showcases, I mean, you talk to and deal with so many people involved with the game. What can people do, like through someone like yourself? You see players, especially over the years, sometimes for their freshman to their senior years, and you can be a connector as well. What can they do through someone like yourself or someone on your staff?
Well, that's a great question, because look, we're all in this business in the variety of positions that we have because we care about kids and we care about the game. So every one of us, and that also holds true for your question at Perfect Game, wants to help kids who aspire to play at the next level. And each one of those staff members has different connections. So I think the important thing is simply to find someone that can advocate for you in an honest and genuine way. And that can be your high school coach. It could be your travel or summer ball coach. It could be the event providers such as Perfect Game. And reach out, because all of those other people have connections in addition to what Rob and the others have said, well-crafted direct communication between the prospect and whatever school it is, because we all want players to continue to play at some level.
Great. Before we move on to our next segment, we have another question, and I'm going to direct this to you, Kevin. A viewer asks, at what age should a player begin to attend showcases? When do college coaches take notice to a player? And if you want to weigh in after Rob as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We talk about this all the time, and I do not think that it's a magic answer. I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think a player should start to attend a showcase and start to market himself when he has the skills to do so. If I'm a 9th grader or a 10th grader and I attend a showcase and they're going to report my raw data out there and it says that I'm a pitcher and I throw 75 miles an hour or I'm an infielder and I run a 8.5 60, well, that's what I'm putting out there. I'm putting out those numbers and that information. So probably if I'm that player, it's probably better off that I spend another year or so trying to refine my skills. But for a player who has next level ability, and for a player who really is ready to put himself out there, I think that timeline has creeped up a lot over the last few years. And I think that by the time you're a sophomore in high school, I think that you need to do that. I really believe that probably the biggest window of time to start doing that now is the summer between your sophomore and junior year. Now, if you are a high level prospect, if you are a big time Division I kid, or you're a potential high school draft pick, well, then you're probably already doing that before because you've probably physically matured. But I think for the average kid, I think it's time to start getting out there and start getting some information about yourself between your 10th and 11th grade year. Rob can talk to this a little bit more, but most of the guys that we see now making commitments to Division I schools are doing so verbally, usually in that summer after their sophomore year of high school, or earlier in some cases. But For the Division II and Division III levels, a lot of it really happens the following summer. But to be able to get in touch with people, to send video out, to contact people leading into your junior year, you need to have some of that stuff done prior to that, which is generally the summer between your sophomore and junior high school year.
Yeah, and I agree with Kevin. It's not a one size fits all. And this is another part where your network is important, because your network can help tell you, if you really trust your high school coach and your club coach, you should, hey, coach, I'm looking to go to a showcase. And he may tell you, hey, wait, you may not be ready for this at this point. You may want to wait until next year, until you're bigger and stronger, or whatever the case may be. But it does vary. Some of the young men that do attend some of our showcases want to get their feet wet in a showcase environment before they go to a perfect game. They don't want to go to a big time showcase and be, a deer in headlights. So sometimes they just want to get that experience to see what a showcase environment is like. And sometimes maybe a college showcase may give them the opportunity to get that experience under their feet. But it does vary. The recruiting clock has sped up very, very quickly within the last few years. I think the hope is that this bump in the road will slow the process down a little bit. And I think it's really important that the prospects do their homework. That's part of when you choose a showcase to attend. That's one of the things that I would look at is if you're a 20 and you call the coach, or you're 21 and you call the coach and his 21 class is already full, there's really no reason for you to go to that showcase. So those are some things that the prospect should have under their feet before they go, is getting as much information for where they're going to go.
We have another question, and I'm going to stick with you, Rob. And the question is it true that college coaches look at both the player and parents' social media profiles?
Yes, I will say, that is a big thing now, especially the way social media is. Nothing is private anymore. And you'll see it at any sport in the college level. You see it at the pro level, where they'll go back and look at a kid who, as a sophomore in high school, he said something on his Twitter account and he's in the NBA, or Major League Baseball. So social media is something that programs do look at. I think players and parents have to understand they have a brand that they represent, and that's themselves. And the universities and the schools and the colleges that they're applying to also have a brand name, and people are looking to protect those brand names. So it's important that everybody does take a look at what they do put out on their social media, and really understand that when they're doing it, they're really putting out what they're about and what their brand is about.
Yeah, I'm going to ask my own question, sticking on this parents theme, which I know can be a hot button for all of us, but I'm going to direct it to you, Kevin, because you deal with the high school and in the community. Every parent thinks their kid can play Division I, is going to get drafted. How can you properly manage parents' expectations when they're pushing the kid and they think their kid's going to be the next all-star? Maybe Division III is a better fit than Division I.
I'll say first, I think a lot of the parents in our program are watching tonight, and we have the greatest parents ever, and they have great expectations. They're very grounded, so we're lucky that we have great parents. But no, one of the things that we do in the beginning of every year is we have a college information night, and one of the things that I say as a high school coach is it's a big part of my job to help as many of our kids as possible continue to play this game for as long as they can. But it's also my job to be very realistic, because if I say, hey, Coach Sheppard, I have a kid that is a stud and he would be great in your program, and he shows up and he's not even close to that, then I just lost all credibility for every future player that comes into my program. So honest conversations are really important. And I think that for parents and for players, I think that they need to be ready to hear that truth. And we go back to this whole networking business, which is really, that is at the core of all of this. And your best advocate, your best asset is probably the coach that spends a lot of time with you, which is your high school or summertime coach. And I think you have to ask that question, coach, where do you see me right now? Or where do you think that I might project? Or what kind of things do you think I need to work on to be able to play at a certain level? And that conversation has to happen because, like Ethan was saying earlier, I mean, there are thousands of college baseball programs out there. We had 22 kids in college baseball that had graduated from our program over the last 4 years. And they all took very different paths. They all had very different skill sets, but they all found a way to make baseball and college together a part of that experience at the next level. And I think it's about being honest. And like, let's face it, even if you really do have a big dream to play pro ball someday, you don't have to be a Division I player. Here in Pennsylvania, we have the PSAC, which is a tremendous Division II conference. And there are guys that get drafted out of the PSAC every year. We had a kid get drafted out of a Penn State satellite campus last year, out of Penn State Berks. So it really depends on what you do when you get there. And once you get your foot in the door, anything's possible. So hit the right level. Be somewhere where you have a chance to play. Be somewhere where you have a chance to actually compete and have that honest conversation with people in your network.
I'm going to move on to our next segment is moving things forward and keeping your body healthy and ready. In the age of where every day seems like the next and it's, kids can fall into traps of sleeping late and playing video games and so forth. It's more important than ever to keep your body ready. Ethan, what can kids do now with the restrictions out there to keep their body healthy and ready for when things do open up?
Yeah, good question. I mean, everyone's in a little bit different situation. And so I think you have to take a really honest look at what you have and what you can do consistently. One thing that I think is really important for kids of any age right now is, usually you're playing games right now, and that's not conducive to adding strength or size. But what you have right now is this unobstructed window where even if you don't have access to a gym, you have the ability to sprint, you have the ability to do push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups and body weight workouts and mobility, stability. So, if you jump online and you do some research, you can put together a really good program that's going to get you stronger. And so any player that gets stronger, whenever things open back up, that's going to improve their baseball skills. So I think, that can be a benefit to a lot of kids right now who actually need that strength in order to be recruitable, so to speak. They have an opportunity. They have a window right now where they can do that. So that's one place I think everyone can focus, but really it's just being honest with yourself and pick one or two things that you feel like you can do consistently so that, when you look up, 6 weeks, 2 months, whenever things open back up, you're going to be in a better place than you were today. And the people who are making the best use of this time right now, those are the ones who are going to be in the best shape when things open back up.
Brad, you guys started to have a couple events and are hopeful you can have a lot more. I mean, a lot of kids are going from 0 to 100. I mean, what are you telling kids, coaches at your events so there's not all those injuries?
Well, the big thing is get prepared. And as everyone has mentioned here is, what are you doing to help yourself? And what are you doing to put your best foot forward, even compared to other players? If you're going to sleep till noon or 1 o'clock and somebody else is up there at 8 getting better. And as Ethan said, you don't have to have access to a high-powered gym. We actually have a replay app, PG Replay, that's strength and conditioning. And we're encouraging people to do something, even though it's not baseball skill specific, to be ready. Now, if you're a pitcher, you need to be throwing too in the right way to ramp up, because the success you have depends on the work that you've done prior to that. So it's just stay active, be active, and do some things that will help you not only on the baseball field, but academically and in other ways as well, because you never know how the dots are going to get connected down the road. And the other thing is, as we've talked about, different people, and certainly the recruiting, as Rob shared, starts younger and younger. Don't get yourself in too big of a hurry by worrying about, I got to commit here or I got to commit there. Build yourself a nice pathway so that you can measure your progress. And whether that's at a showcase when you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, whatever it is, just continue to improve and make sure you're putting in the time to do that.
Rob, what are you telling your players to keep their bodies ready and in shape?
The same, every athlete or every player is going to have a different circumstance. Some guys may have weights in their house, some don't. But the message that I tell our guys is, what are you going to do to separate yourself from the other players? What are you doing every day to separate yourself from the other guys? And something as, and I was listening to Eric Cressy. Eric Cressy is a really well-renowned baseball strength and conditioning. He works with the Yankees. He's in charge of player development and a lot of their strength conditioning. And one of the things that he had mentioned is there's going to be a lot of lower extremity injuries early on because everybody wants to hit and throw, but no one, like Ethan said, no one's sprinting. So I'm telling my guys, if you want to get faster, the only way you're going to get faster is by sprinting. If you have the ability to play when July rolls around, you don't want to, be sitting for 2 months and then all of a sudden you pull a hamstring and you're sitting for another month. So just telling guys to do something that will help them, number one, separate themselves from the other players, and number two, that they can continue to build on to become a better player, and most importantly, a better athlete. Some of the players, high school players, they may not have a cage or a mound around them. Shoot hoops, play basketball, do something that keeps you active, that makes you a better athlete instead of just sitting around. If you don't have someone to play catch with, go find a wall and take a baseball, lacrosse ball, and work on your ground balls. You can find things to do and find ways to get it done. And that's the way, you just got to get creative and like I guess Ethan and Brad, and I'm sure Kevin tells his players, there's a lot of ways you can do it. Just find a way that helps you become a better player.
Rob, we had a kid whose mom was hitting him tennis balls with a tennis racket on his driveway, and he was taking ground ball work. And he sent me that video, and I thought, well, that's great. We had another kid taking wiffle balls and throwing them against his garage door, getting the bunt, the ricochet, and practicing his bunting. I mean, you do some of that every day, and before you know it, you're building up, quite a workout routine.
Yeah, I had two players. I had one player of mine when the social distancing first started. Him and his neighbor, they would hit from one driveway to the other. They hit ground balls to each other. So until all the balls got on one side, he hit them back to him on the other side. And I don't know how good it was. They're all touching the balls, but kept them busy.
We have two questions. The first for you, Rob, is will a walk-on even get noticed given the current situation?
That can be tough. We've walk-ons, and what I call walk-ons, I think some people have a different perception of walk-ons. Most of the walk-ons that we have, we know about. There's very few times where you get a player from nowhere that you've never seen before. But walk-ons have been the lifeblood of a lot of college programs. Like I said, we have 11.7 scholarships for a 35-man roster. We can only give that money to 27 players. So there are players on our team that don't get any athletic money. The question's going to be, if the rosters are so full and so loaded, is there any flexibility within that roster to have room for a walk-on, especially this year? So this year may be a little bit more competitive and tough. And I think moving forward, it may be, but for Division I, I think at any baseball, any level, walk-ons are a big part of your program. There's guys that come in and, they develop at different rates. Some guys become draft picks. We've had a lot of success with guys that come to our program, and part of it is their growth. As they get older, they get bigger and stronger. Part of it, I think a big part of it is our player development, that players get a chance to get better and work at it. So eventually they become a bigger part of our program as they get older. But I think that goes back to doing your homework. Look at the rosters, look at the size of the recruiting classes, how many seniors. I would even ask if that's something that is important to you. connect with the coach and ask them, how many walk-ons do you have? Do you have room for a walk-on? You know, and then sometimes certain positions will get a better look than others. You know, if you're a pitcher or a catcher, there's usually a little bit more flexibility and room for you if you're a walk-on, because you know those positions are very important.
We have another question. I'm going to direct this to you, Kevin. What is more important, going to a showcase or attending a college camp?
So that's a great question, and we give this advice to guys a lot. I think that if you know very specifically, let's say Seton Hall is having a camp, and you know very specifically that that's a school that you really would like to go to, I think your best bang for your buck a lot of times is to go to those college camps. I mean, a lot of times they cost a lot less money than a showcase, and you also can guarantee with certainty that you're going to be putting yourself out there in front of the coaches that are at that camp. Now, if you don't have one that you know of that's available, or if you're not really sure what school you want to go to, well, then go to a showcase, but research that showcase ahead of time and make sure you know what schools are going to be there. I know a lot of people will hit, 3 or 4 showcases over the course of the summer and fall, and sometimes they're being seen by the same coaches 3 or 4 times, as opposed to maybe trying to get a little bit more variety in terms of who's going to be there. So I think a lot of it has to do with just what your specific needs are, but doing your homework on any showcase before you just write the check and go.
All right, we're coming down towards the end. I want to remind everybody that's watching to please ask questions in the chat. We'll get to them as we come, but we have 10 minutes or so left. I want to move into our final segment, which I want each of our panelists to weigh in on. I'm going to start with you, Ethan. Is final advice for kids that want to play at that next level. We talked about a lot of different things, networking, keeping your body ready, the fit of a school, but especially given where we are now, what's your final advice for both kids and parents out there?
I think for starters, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. It doesn't have to be expensive. If you have $0 to spend on the recruiting process, there are free alternatives for every aspect of the recruiting process. So that's one thing. When I go talk to groups of parents, players, always ask 3 things. Who wants to play college baseball? Raise your hand. Every single hand goes up. Everyone wants to play. Question 2, who knows what it takes to get recruited and the hoops you're going to have to jump through to get recruited? And there's usually just a handful of hands that remain up. And then I ask, who has a personal plan for how you're going to make your goal happen? And almost no hands remain, maybe a committed kid or 2. So I think the biggest thing is do your homework, get informed on the recruiting process. There's free resources. You can check us out. We don't charge a dime for anything, cover every aspect of the recruiting process. So you have to come up with a personalized plan, given where you are right now and the level you want to get to, or the programs you're interested in. How are you going to make that happen? How are you going to, 1, meet the standard of play, 2, meet the standard of academics, 3, show the coaches that you have what they're looking for. So come up with a plan, map it out. It's going to change. Recruiting is a very fluid, dynamic process. And so don't be afraid to make adjustments, but you need to have a plan for how you're going to get there, because if you don't, you're going to look up in 2 or 3 years when high school is over and wish that you had done X, Y, Z. So I guess just, hey, there's a program out there for you if you're willing to work hard enough, if you're willing to dedicate the time. College baseball is not for everyone. It's a ton of hard work, and it self-selects a little bit in that way. So you got to have a good plan. You have to be willing to differentiate yourself from others by attention to detail, outworking them, and then connecting with college coaches. So it's very possible for anyone, and we're here to help.
Brad, what's your best advice for kids and parents?
Well, I would just maybe dovetail on what Ethan said there. Figure out what you need to do to get better, ask questions, listen, and then make that plan to do that. We talked about networking directly and indirectly a number of times here, and to be truthful, that's accurate, whether you're going to play baseball in college or whatever you're going to do. And we all know as professionals in different areas, That's still important for us to do, that continual learning and figuring out what it takes for you to get to the next level. And I liked what Kevin and Rob and Ethan all said about having genuine and honest conversations with people that you trust, and then find somebody that can advocate for you. We have a PG Cares Foundation that does a lot of work, not just with baseball, but wherever kids have a passion, particularly in the underserved community, we want to help them. And there are a lot of other organizations, including Ethan, the 3 and 2 Foundation, that are also in the business of helping kids aspire to whatever their next level is.
Kevin, what's your best advice? And I'll throw another question on there too that maybe you tackle first. What do you tell kids that are multi-sport athletes that can't necessarily attend baseball camps or showcases in the summer?
Yeah, I'll start with that question. I actually think that in an odd way, that playing field is now leveled, because the multi-sport kids that often can't attend stuff are now in the same boat as all the other kids who don't have
That's right.
to attend. So I think what we've said about the environment right now, I think it really applies all the time to the multi-sport kids. And first of all, every college coach I've ever talked to loves multi-sport athletes because they adjust better, they get injured less, they're more competitive. So first of all, not being able to attend a camp or a showcase should never be a deterrent to playing multiple sports. But I think those kids have to do what we're talking about with everybody right now, and that is, number one, reach out to college coaches. Number two, put a video together. Take that window of time where you are playing baseball, say whether it's, from February or March up until, June or the beginning of July, and use that window of time to create that network and to market yourself in the same way that now everybody kind of is going to have to do that for most of the summer. Back to the other question, since, Ethan and Brad talked about it a little more specific about the networking and the communication, I'll say from a little different angle, I've seen a lot of movement toward a lot of kids being so worried about the next level that they forget to develop the skills that are in front of them right now. And a lot of showcases are more measurable stuff. What's your velocity on the mound? What's your exit velo? And what's your 60 time and all that stuff? But what about, do you know how to get hitters out? Do you know how to put together a good at-bat? Do you work your butt off and hustle on and off the field all the time? Do you have good situational awareness? And I think that players have to remember how important it is to refine all of those skills. And just because they throw hard doesn't mean they're going to stick at the next level. A lot of kids go to a college with the intent of playing because they had good numbers. But when they get there, the coach needs to win. The program has to win. And if you don't know how to get a hitter out, or if you can't pitch to contact and last for 6 or 7 innings, and instead you're coming out of the game after the 3rd inning all the time, you're not putting yourself in position to do well when you get there. So one of my biggest pieces of advice, I think, is as kids try to navigate this process is, don't forget that skill development and the ability to execute and to understand how to win, that stuff is going to be what's going to keep you in the lineup once you get there. And we can't overlook how important that stuff is in this whole recruiting process.
We've talked a lot about the kids, and the kids are the ones who are on the field. But Rob, for you, what's your best advice for parents?
I think it's not much different than what we're telling the players from the standpoint of communicating. I think the parents and the player should use their network. We keep on saying the network, but sometimes, and I think Ethan hit on it well, sometimes that player might not be cut out for that level of play, not only from a physical or a talent standpoint, but just the daily grind of what you have to do to make it happen. So I think the parents need to really sit down with their sons and daughters and kind of have that honest conversation that, do you want to play? Because ultimately it's going to be the athlete, it's going to be the student that's getting up in the morning, going for 6 a.m. lifts and practicing and playing and everything else. So having that honest conversation. And then the other part is doing their homework, making sure that as a family, they find that it's a good fit. What I tell our players, and there's a lot of things that go into that fit category, whether I'm going to play as a freshman, do they offer my major? Can we afford it? Those are all parts of that fit. And when I tell our recruits that when you're making that decision, I want them to make the decision based on 4 years. I don't want them to dip their toe in the pond and say, okay, doesn't work out the first year, I'll transfer. I really want them, because from me, I want to make a commitment to my players for 4 years. If they're coming to Seton Hall, or whether they're a walk-on or not, that's the intent. And they have to have that conversation as a family if that's something that they can, sign on for and make happen. So communicate with their sons, use their network to get as much information about the process, and look into the schools that would really be a good fit from an academic standpoint first.
Well, we're coming down to the very, very end. So we're going to end with a quick lightning round. We talked about a lot of different things, but just to wrap it up, we're going to go around the horn and ask each of you 3 things that a high school player can do in this new world order to get recruited. Ethan, I'll start with you.
3 things. Be a good teammate. Work on being the best version of yourself. Have a plan. That's it.
Brad, I'll go to you next.
Work hard, care about other people, and always do your best. Be where your hands are.
Kevin?
Tangible things, be very honest about where you belong. Make a good video that you can send out. And then a little less tangible is make sure that you really love baseball. Don't do it because you want to post something on social media that says, I committed somewhere. You have to love baseball because it's your life at the next level. So give yourself a reality check.
Rob, you have the last word.
Yeah, for me, it's compete. I want to see them compete. I think right now it's important for the players to go out and play the game. And then ultimately, the other stuff will take care of itself. If you're good enough, we're going to find you. And as Ethan says, you're going to find the right fit. So you go out there, compete, play the game hard, hustle. I would say continue to do your homework with regards to where you want to play and where you think you'll be a good fit. And then the last is, I think the keep hammering is communicate. You need to communicate. The process goes at different speeds for everybody. So communicate and work your way through it.
Well, great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. This has been highly informative. It's been a terrific panel with lots of great information. This concludes our panel. Please join us next Thursday for the New World Order of Softball Recruiting, which has many similarities and many differences. We'll have an esteemed panel of guests from the softball space, and there'll be lots of great insight there next week. So thank you for joining us. Everyone, best of luck, stay healthy and stay safe. Good night.